Sam tugged his father's sleeve. Does this mean we can go home? Home. The word hung in the air like a prayer. Evangeline looked at their faces, really looked, and saw herself reflected there. Lost, afraid, desperate for something solid to hold on to. Yes, she said. You can go home. The crowd began to disperse. Neighbors avoided eye contact. They had witnessed something unprecedented and weren't sure what it meant. Wickham remained. His presence felt like storm clouds gathering. $500 buys a lot of loyalty in this town, he said, but not enough to protect you from what comes next. He walked away without looking back. His footsteps echoed long after he disappeared into his bank. Jed shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, what exactly do you want from us? The question deserved an honest answer. Evangeline smoothed her skirts, buying time to find words that made sense. I want to offer you a partnership. Your land and knowledge, my capital. We build something together. Why? Such a simple question. Such a complicated answer. Because she was tired of running. Because wealth meant nothing without purpose. Because something in their faces reminded her of the woman she used to be before life taught her to hide. Because everyone deserves a choice. Sam stepped forward. His small hand slipped into hers without hesitation. The trust in that gesture nearly broke her composure. Are you going to be our new ma? The innocence of childhood cut straight to the heart. Evangeline squeezed his fingers gently. I'm going to be your friend, if you'll have me. Jed watched this exchange with guarded eyes. Trust would not come easily. She had bought them at auction regardless of her intentions. That transaction would color everything that followed. But Sam smiled. It was a start. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. The town square emptied until only the three of them remained. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolled the hour. Evangeline had torn up $500 worth of debt papers. She had declared war on the most powerful man in the territory. She had promised partnership to strangers who had every reason to distrust her. The smart thing would be to leave. On the next train, return to Boston and face whatever waited there, cut her losses and run. Instead, she looked at the cowboy and his son standing in the fading light. She thought about the hollow-eyed children in doorways, the families torn apart on auction blocks, the weight of gold hidden in her corset. Show me your ranch, she said. The Callaway Ranch stretched across broken ground beneath an endless sky. Fence posts leaned at angles that spoke of hard winters and harder times. The cabin sat small against the horizon, weathered wood silvered by sun and wind. Jed stopped his horse at the property line. His shoulders carried the weight of what Evangeline was seeing. Dying cattle dotted the sparse grass. A barn roof sagged, where boards had blown away. Not much to look at, he said. Sam slid down from behind his father. His bare feet hit the dirt without sound. He ran toward the cabin like it held everything precious in the world. Evangeline studied the land with different eyes. She saw water rights and grazing potential, strategic position between two major cattle routes, good bones beneath the broken surface. How much do you owe? More than I'll ever have. The numbers didn't matter now. She had torn up the papers. But the debt lived on in his posture, the careful way he avoided her gaze. Inside the cabin, Sam showed her his mother's things. A quilt, folded on a trunk. Dried flowers pressed between Bible pages. A photograph of a woman with gentle eyes and work-worn hands. She died 2 winters ago, Sam said. Papa says she's watching from heaven. Jed stood in the doorway, his knuckles pressed, white against the frame. Fever took her, he said. Nothing we could do. The lie hung in the air between them. Evangeline had heard Wickham's threat at the auction. Ask Callaway about his wife. Some fevers came from sickness. Others came from crossing powerful men. She touched the quilt with careful fingers. The stitching told stories of long evenings by lamplight. A woman building beauty in a harsh place. She made good choices, Evangeline said. That night she slept on a blanket by the dying fire. Jed took the barn. Sam curled up in his small bed, breathing deep and peaceful. The child trusted her completely. His father trusted nothing. Morning brought the sound of hammering. Jed worked on the barn roof before dawn broke fully. His movements spoke of desperate purpose. Fix what could be fixed. Hold what could be held. Evangeline found him balancing on a beam, nails between his teeth. Sweat darkened his shirt despite the cool air. I can hire men for this. He drove another nail. Don't need charity. It's not charity, it's partnership. The hammer paused. What kind of partnership involves buying a man and his... The mail-order bride bought the poor cowboy and his son at auction for $500. The town square fell silent as Evangeline Thornfield tore their debt papers in half. Dust swirled around her polished boots. The crowd pressed closer, breath held, waiting for what came next. Barnaby Wickham's face burned red beneath his black hat. You don't know what you've done, woman. Evangeline met his glare. Her hands remained steady despite the tremor in her chest. The torn papers fluttered to the dirt like dying leaves. You're free, she told the cowboy and his boy. Jed Calloway stood frozen beside the auction block. His son Sam clutched his father's weathered hand. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Wickham stepped forward. His boots struck the ground like hammer blows. This town has a way of dealing with troublemakers. Ask Calloway about his wife. The words hit their mark. Jed's jaw tightened. Sam pressed, closer to his father's side. Evangeline lifted her chin. The wind caught her dark hair, pulling strands free from their careful arrangement. She had come too far to retreat now. 3 weeks earlier, the train had carried her across endless prairie toward a future she could not imagine. Boston felt like another lifetime. The weight of her inheritance pressed against her ribs through the hidden money belt. Her husband's business partner would never find her here in this forgotten corner of Wyoming territory. The advertisement had promised respectability, a banker seeking a refined wife, a chance to start fresh where no one knew her story. Dust Creek looked nothing like the letters described. The main street stretched between sagging buildings like a scar across the earth. Children with hollow cheeks watched from doorways. Women hurried past with lowered eyes. Wickham waited at the station platform. His smile never reached his eyes. His handshake lingered too long. Welcome to your new home, my dear. The boarding house room smelled of old wood and broken dreams. Evangeline sat on the narrow bed and counted the bills hidden in her corset lining. Enough to buy half the territory. Enough to disappear forever if needed. Wickham's true nature revealed itself over supper. He spoke of the town like a man discussing livestock, which families carried debt, which properties would soon be available, which children might be put to useful work. The monthly auction keeps order, he explained, cutting his meat with surgical precision. People understand consequences. Here. Evangeline's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Auction? Debt collection. When folks can't pay, they work it off. Simple business. Her appetite vanished. The meat turned to ash on her tongue. The first auction taught her everything she needed to know about Barnaby Wickham. Families stood on the block like cattle. Mothers bid farewell to children sold into service. Men watched their wives claimed by strangers. The crowd accepted it all with dead eyes. This was simply how things worked in Dust Creek. Then came the Calloways. Jed stood straight despite the weight on his shoulders. His calloused hands rested on his son's thin frame. Sam looked up at his father with complete trust, unaware they were being sold like property. Starting bid $50 for both, the auctioneer called. Wickham raised his hand immediately. His smile promised nothing good. Other hands rose. Ranchers seeking cheap labor. Businessmen calculating profit. No one saw the father and son trembling on the platform. Evangeline's chest burned. Her late husband's voice echoed in her memory. Money is just a tool, Ava. What matters is how you use it. She raised her hand. 100. Wickham's head snapped toward her. His smile faltered. 150, he countered. The bidding war began. Numbers climbed higher than anyone expected. The crowd stirred, sensing something different. This wasn't about labor anymore. 400, Wickham called, sweat beading. On his forehead. Evangeline's inheritance could buy and sell this entire town. Her husband's business partner had taught her that wealth was power. Today she would learn if he was right. 500. The words fell like stones into still water. Ripples spread through the crowd. Even the auctioneer hesitated. Wickham's mouth opened, closed. No sound emerged. Going once, going twice. The gavel struck wood. Sold to the lady from Boston. Now she stood in the settling dust, watching a father and son try to understand their fate. The crowd waited for her to claim her property, to lead them away like purchased animals. Instead, she tore their papers apart. The pieces scattered on the wind. Some landed near Wickham's polished boots. He stared down at them like they might reassemble themselves. "This isn't over," he said quietly. Only she could hear. "This town belongs to me. Everyone in it belongs to me. Including you." Jed finally found his voice. "Ma'am, I don't understand." "Neither do I," she admitted. "But we'll figure it out." "Boy?" Fair question. She had no fair answer. The auction had been impulse more than strategy. Seeing them on that block had broken something inside her chest. The kind where we figure it out as we go. He climbed down from the roof. Studied, her face in the growing light. Looking for tells that would reveal her true motives. "Rich folks don't help people for free. What do you really want?" The question cut deep because she wasn't sure herself. Safety, maybe. Purpose. A place to belong after years of running. "I want to build something that lasts." Sam appeared around the corner, chasing a half-wild kitten. His laughter filled the morning air. When he stumbled and scraped his knee on a loose board, tears came fast and hot. Evangeline knelt beside him, pulled a clean handkerchief from her pocket. The blood wasn't much, but the fear was real. "It's all right," she murmured. "Just a scratch." She cleaned the wound with gentle hands. Sam leaned against her shoulder, trusting her to make the hurt stop. When had anyone last tended his injuries with such care? Jed watched from beside the barn. His expression shifted, walls lowering just enough to let doubt creep in. Rich ladies didn't usually carry medicine in their pockets. The next weeks fell into careful rhythm. Evangeline made trips to town for supplies. Jed worked the land with renewed purpose. Sam followed them both, soaking up attention like desert ground drinks rain. But Wickham's shadow stretched long over everything they built. The first sign came subtly. Fence wire cut during the night. Cattle spooked and scattered. Supply orders mysteriously canceled or delayed. Then the rumors started. The woman who bought herself a man. Unnatural creature. From back east. What kind of decent lady carries that much money? Evangeline heard the whispers at the general store. Saw the way decent women gathered their skirts closer when she passed. Wickham's poison worked slow, but certain. Jed noticed the isolation too. His jaw tightened when former friends crossed streets to avoid them. When Sam came home asking why other children couldn't play anymore. "This is my fault," she said one evening. They sat on the cabin porch, watching stars emerge. "I made you targets." "We were already targets." His voice carried old pain. Sarah learned that the hard way. Sarah. His wife's name spoken for the first time. A door opening just a crack. What happened to her? Silence stretched between them. Night wind moved through dying grass. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. She stood, up to Wickham, publicly. Said his interest rates were stealing food from children's mouths. His hands curled into fists. Found her at the bottom of Miller's Creek 3 days later. They said she slipped on wet rocks. The creek ran shallow and slow. A child could wade across it safely. But Sarah Calloway had somehow drowned there on a clear autumn day. No one questioned it. Wickham owns the sheriff, owns the doctor, owns everyone who matters. Evangeline felt the weight of that knowledge settle in her chest. She had challenged a man who killed women for speaking truth. What would he do to someone who cost him $500 in public? The attack came. The following week, she woke to Sam screaming. Fire licked at the barn walls, hungry flames reaching toward the hayloft. Jed ran from the cabin with water buckets, shouting for her to get Sam away from the building. They fought the fire until dawn, saved most of the structure but lost feed for the winter. Smoke hung in the air for days, a bitter reminder of how quickly safety could burn away. No one came to help. No neighbors offered assistance. The town had chosen its side. But something else burned away that night. Jed's resistance crumbled as he watched Evangeline work beside him, dress ruined, hands blistered, refusing to stop, until the last ember died. "Why?" he asked as they sat exhausted in the ash-covered yard. "Why stay when you could leave?" She looked at Sam sleeping against her shoulder, at the man who had lost everything but kept fighting, at the damaged barn they had saved together. "Because this is home now." The words surprised her with their truth. She had spent years running from place to place, never putting down roots. But something about this broken ranch and broken family felt like solid ground. That afternoon brought visitors. 3 men on horseback, faces hidden by hat brims. They sat their horses at the property line like predators testing boundaries. Jed stepped onto the porch. His rifle rested casual in his hands, but his finger found the trigger guard. "You folks lost?" "Just checking on the fire damage," the lead rider called. "Shame about your barn. These things happen when people don't take proper precautions." The threat wrapped itself in neighborly concern. They stayed long enough to make their point, then rode away toward town. Dust hung in the air behind them. That evening, Evangeline made her decision. She saddled Jed's old mare and rode toward the hills where cattle grazed. The rustlers had been subtle, but she recognized the signs. Missing animals. Strange horse tracks near the creek. She found them just after sunset. 5 men rebranding stolen cattle in a hidden canyon. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Lessons learned on a Montana ranch before pride and love drove them apart. When she rode back to the cabin, Jed waited on the porch. His worry had carved lines around his eyes. "Where were you?" "Checking our boundaries." "In the dark?" She tied the mare to the hitching post. Her movements were careful, controlled, but excitement hummed beneath the surface. "I know where they're hiding our cattle." His rifle came up fast, eyes scanning the darkness for immediate threats. "How many?" 5 men. Professional operation. They've been working this area for months." Jed stared at her. "How do you know that?" The question hung between them. She could deflect again. Keep her secrets buried. But lies were just another kind of prison. "Because I grew up on a ranch, a big one. I know cattle and I know thieves." "What ranch?" Wind moved through the grass. Stars wheeled overhead. Truth pressed against her ribs, demanding release. "The double H in Montana. Thomas Hartwell was my father." The name hit him like a physical blow. Everyone in cattle country knew Thomas Hartwell, king of the northern ranges, owner of more land than some states. "Was? He disowned me when I married beneath my station, cut me off completely when my husband died." Jed set his rifle aside, studied her face in the moonlight, seeing her clearly for the first time. "You're not just some rich widow." "No, I'm a rancher who happens to have money." Understanding dawned slow and sure. Her knowledge of cattle prices, her instinct for good grazing land, the way she moved, around horses and livestock. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to trust me for who I am, not who my father was." Sam appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep. "Are we safe?" Evangeline held out her hand. He came without hesitation, settling between them on the porch steps. "We're safe," she said. But safety was relative in Wickham's territory. The barn fire was just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring new threats, new tests of their fragile alliance. Tonight, though, they sat together under stars that belonged to no man. Three people who had found each other in the marketplace of desperation, building something that might last if they proved strong enough to defend it. The wind carried the scent of burned timber and new possibilities. In the distance, cattle, lowed soft and peaceful. Their cattle, their land, their choice to make it work or die trying. Spring brought new grass and careful hope. The Calloway Ranch bloomed under Evangeline's investment and Jed's tireless work. Cattle grazed on mended pastures. The barn stood straight and strong with a new roof. Sam grew tall and brown from sunshine. His laugh echoed across the valley when he chased calves or helped his father repair fences. The hollow look left his eyes replaced by something Evangeline had never expected to see again. The look of a child who felt safe. She watched him from the kitchen window as she prepared supper. Jed worked beside the boy, patient hands guiding small fingers around wire and wood. Father and son moved in harmony, rebuilding what had been broken. "Ma, look what I made." Sam burst through the door holding a carved wooden horse. The craftsmanship was rough, but the pride was real. "Ma." The word still caught her off guard. He had started using it naturally, without ceremony or explanation, as if she had always belonged to their small family. Jed followed, wiping sawdust from his hands. Their eyes met across the lamplit room. Something passed between them in that glance. Recognition, gratitude, the weight of shared burdens and quiet nights. He had stopped questioning her presence, stopped waiting for her to reveal selfish motives. Trust grew slow in soil that had been poisoned, but it grew. The town noticed their success. Neighbors who had shunned them began nodding politely in the street. The general store welcomed her business. Even the preacher's wife managed a tight smile after church services. Money talked loudest in a place where survival hung by threads. The Calloway Ranch provided jobs for men who needed work, bought supplies from merchants who needed customers, fed the local economy in ways that mattered more than gossip. But Wickham's hatred burned cold and patient. The first sign came through Sam. He returned from town with questions that cut deep. "Mrs. Henderson says you're not really married to Papa. She says that makes you a bad woman." Evangeline set down her mending. The needle trembled in her fingers. Such a small weapon to cause such damage. "What do you think, Sam?" "I think Mrs. Henderson is mean. But why aren't you married? Don't you love us?" The question hung in the evening air. Jed sat frozen by the fireplace, whittling knife paused mid-stroke. Neither of them had spoken of marriage, though it lived in glances and shared silences. "I love you both very much," she said carefully. "Sometimes, grown-ups have complicated reasons for their choices." Sam accepted this with the faith of childhood. But the seed was planted. Doubt grew in soil prepared by whispered rumors and sideways looks. The poison spread through deliberate channels, women's sewing circles, men's conversations at the saloon, questions designed to wound without seeming cruel. Why hadn't they wed properly? What kind of woman lived unmarried with a man and child? What secrets was she hiding from her past? Evangeline felt the town's opinion shifting beneath her feet. Acceptance built on money proved fragile as morning frost. Respectability demanded different currency. She found Wickham waiting outside the bank one morning. His smile held winter's edge. "Quite the little homestead you've built," he said. "Shame about the talk, though. People do love their gossip. What do you want, Barnaby?" "I want you gone. Simple as that." He adjusted his gold watch with careful precision. "Leave town quietly, and I'll let the Calloways keep their land. Stay and watch everything you've built turn to ash." The threat wrapped itself in reasonable words, but his eyes held the same cold promise they had carried the day Sarah Calloway drowned. "You killed his wife." "I killed no one. Poor woman slipped on wet rocks. Tragic accident." His smile never wavered. Accidents happen so easily when people don't listen to good advice. She walked away without answering, but the weight of his words followed her home. That evening, she sat with Jed on the porch they had built together. Stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles. The night air carried the scent of hay and possibility. "Wickham offered me a deal," she said. Jed's whittling stopped. "What kind of deal?" "Leave town. He lets you keep the ranch." Silence stretched between them. A coyote called from distant hills. Cattle shifted and settled in the darkness. "And if you stay? He destroys us all." Jed set down his knife. Studied her profile in the moonlight, reading the conflict written in the set of her shoulders. "What do you want to do?" Such a simple question, such an impossible answer. She wanted to stay and fight, wanted to build the life they had started, wanted to watch Sam grow strong and see what bloomed between her and his father. But wanting and surviving were different things in Wickham's territory. "I want to protect you both." By running? By being smart. He stood and walked to the porch rail. His hands gripped the wood they had cut and shaped together. Everything here carried their combined effort, their shared vision of what home could be. "Sarah tried to run," he said finally. "Packed her bags the night before she died. Said we should leave before Wickham made good on his threats." The words fell heavy in the darkness. Another piece of the puzzle sliding into place. She didn't slip. No, she was murdered for trying to escape. His voice carried 2 years of rage and grief. "Running didn't save her. Won't save us." A night bird called from the cottonwoods. Wind moved through new grass. The ranch breathed around them, alive with promise and threat. "So what do we do?" "We fight, together, all of us." The next morning brought visitors. Federal agents in dusty suits asking questions about cattle theft and suspicious banking practices. They moved through town with quiet efficiency, following trails Evangeline had not expected them to find. She watched from the general store as they emerged from Wickham's bank. His face had gone pale as winter sky. His hands shook as he locked the door behind them. One of the agents tipped his hat to her. "Ma'am, lovely day, isn't it?" "Beautiful," she agreed. That afternoon, Sam fell ill. Not the ordinary sickness of childhood, but something that came on sudden and violent. Fever spiked, beyond reason. His small body convulsed with pain that made no sense. Evangeline sat beside his bed through the long night, cool cloths on burning skin, water forced between chattering teeth, prayers whispered to a God who seemed far away. Jed paced the small room. His boots wore paths in the wooden floor. Every few minutes he checked the window, watching for threats that might come from any direction. "The Henderson boy was sick last week," he said. "Same symptoms. Doc said it was just bad water." But the Henderson boy had recovered in a day. Sam's fever climbed higher as the hours passed. His breathing grew shallow and labored. Near dawn, when hope felt thin as spider silk, Sam's eyes opened. Clear and bright and focused on her face. "Ma, I had scary dreams." She gathered him close, feeling the fever break like storm clouds parting. His skin cooled beneath her palms. His breathing deepened and steadied. "Just dreams, sweetheart. You're safe now." But as she held him, she noticed the bitter taste in the water pitcher, saw the way Jed's jaw tightened as he examined the well. Some fevers came from sickness. Others came from poison. That evening, Wickham's final ultimatum arrived by messenger. A boy from town, nervous and scared, thrust the envelope into her hands and fled. The words were simple and direct. Leave by Sunday or face the consequences. No more warnings, no more chances. She read it, twice, then fed it to the fire, watched the paper curl and blacken, watched her choices narrow to a single point. Stay and fight a man who poisoned children. Run and abandon the only family she had ever chosen. Outside, Sam played with his wooden horse. His laughter carried on the evening breeze. Inside, Jed cleaned his rifle with methodical care. preparing for whatever came next. The federal agents had asked pointed questions about missing cattle, about suspicious accidents, about money that disappeared and reappeared in convenient patterns. Someone had been feeding them information, someone who understood banking and cattle theft and the careful construction of criminal empires. Wickham would know soon enough who had betrayed him. When he did, accidents would start happening to people who asked too many questions. Unless she stopped him first. The war was coming whether she stayed or fled. The only choice left was whether to face it from a position of strength or watch it destroy everything she loved from a safe distance. She looked at Sam playing in the firelight. At Jed maintaining weapons with soldiers' precision. At the home they had built from nothing but hope and stubbornness. Some things were worth fighting for. Some things were worth dying for. She began to plan. Sunday morning arrived with blood-red sunrise and the sound of hoofbeats. Evangeline watched from the kitchen window as Sheriff Morrison rode up with 2 deputies. Their badges caught the early light, but their faces carried Wickham's orders. Jed stepped onto the porch. His rifle stayed inside, but his hand rested near his sidearm. Sam pressed against the window beside Evangeline, sensing the danger without understanding it. "Jed Calloway," the sheriff called. "You're under arrest for cattle rustling." The words fell into morning silence. Birds stopped singing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "What cattle?" Jed's voice carried no surprise. They had expected this move. "Henderson's prize bull. Witness saw you moving it across your property 3 nights ago." Lies wrapped in legal authority. Evangeline's chest tightened as she recognized Wickham's final gambit. Remove Jed from the equation. Leave her isolated and vulnerable. The deputies dismounted with practiced efficiency. One covered Jed while the other produced iron shackles. No resistance would be tolerated. "Papa?" Sam's voice cracked with fear. Jed's eyes found his son through the window. Love and desperation warred in his expression. Then his gaze shifted to Evangeline. 1,000 unspoken words passed between them. "Trust me," her slight nod conveyed. "I'll fix this." They took him away in chains while Sam sobbed against her shoulder. The sound of hoofbeats faded into distance, leaving only emptiness and the weight of impossible choices. That afternoon, Wickham came calling. He sat his horse at the property line just close enough to make his point. His smile held winter's cruelest edge. "Shame about Jed," he called. "Cattle theft is a hanging offense in these parts." Evangeline stepped off the porch. Her skirts whispered against the wooden steps. Behind her, Sam watched through the window, small face pressed to glass. "What do you want?" "Same thing I've always wanted, you gone." He adjusted his reins with deliberate care. "Sign over your property rights. Take the boy and leave. I'll see that the charges disappear." "And if I refuse?" "Then you'll watch him hang. Simple as that." The words hit their mark. Wickham had learned to aim for the heart, knew that threatening Jed would accomplish what threatening her could not. "I need time to think." "You have until tomorrow. After that, justice takes its course." He rode away whistling, leaving dust and ultimatums in his wake. That evening, Evangeline sat at her small writing desk composing letters she had never wanted to write. The words came hard, each one a small death of pride. "Dear Father," she began, "I need your help." The letter to Thomas Hartwell swallowed her remaining dignity. She explained her situation without excuses, asked for intervention she had no right to expect, signed it with the name she had abandoned years ago. "Your daughter, Eva." The second letter went to Marshall Williams in Cheyenne, a man who owed her late husband a favor. The words were careful, coded, information about missing cattle and suspicious banking practices. Evidence that certain federal agents might find interesting. She sealed both letters with trembling hands. Tomorrow's choices would determine whether help arrived in time. Morning brought no rescue, only the sound of hammering as men built a gallows in the town square. The rhythm echoed across the valley, counting down to Jed's execution. Evangeline, dressed with extra care. The blue dress Jed had admired, her mother's pearl earrings. If this was to be her final performance, she would play it well. The trial was scheduled for noon, a mockery of justice conducted in the saloon with Wickham's man presiding. She had perhaps an hour to destroy a man who had ruled through fear for decades. She found what she needed in his office. The lock picked easily with skills learned from her husband's more questionable associates. Inside, Wickham's ledgers told their own story. Money moved in suspicious patterns, cattle brands altered on paper, town funds diverted to private accounts. But the real treasure lay in his safe. Documents that proved what everyone suspected, but no one could prove. Wickham had been systematically bankrupting the town to line his own pockets. The combination came from watching his fingers at the bank. Men of habit revealed themselves in small rituals. She had learned to read such tells in Boston's cutthroat social circles. Inside the safe, evidence of a decade's worth of theft, but also something more damning. Correspondence with known cattle thieves, payment records for services rendered, a web of corruption that reached far beyond one small town. At the bottom of the stack, a letter that stopped her cold, written in Wickham's careful hand to a man in Denver, instructions for eliminating a troublesome woman named Sarah Calloway. Murder reduced to business correspondence, evil made mundane through careful planning. She photographed everything with her small camera. Technology that seemed miraculous in this remote place. Insurance against the day when Wickham's word might not be enough. The trial began as she slipped back into the crowd. Jed stood straight, despite his chains, dignity intact even in the face of manufactured justice. The judge was Wickham's cousin. The jury consisted of men who owed the banker money. Guilty before the gavel fell. "Does the defendant have anything to say?" Judge Wickham asked. Jed's eyes found Evangeline in the crowd. Something passed between them. Understanding, forgiveness, love that transcended the bonds of legal marriage. "I've lived an honest life," he said simply. "My son knows that. That's enough." The judge raised his gavel for the final blow. Justice purchased and paid for in advance. "Wait." Evangeline's voice cut through the stale air. She stood slowly, letting every eye in the room focus on her. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. "I have evidence of the real cattle thief." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Wickham's face went pale as creekstones. He had not expected her to fight back publicly. "This is highly irregular," the judge protested. "So is framing innocent men." She moved toward the front of the room, each step deliberate and measured. But then, the Wickham family has always been flexible about the law. She placed the photographs on the judge's table. Bank records showing systematic theft, correspondence proving conspiracy, years of corruption, laid bare in black and white. These documents were taken from Barnaby Wickham's private safe. They show a pattern of cattle theft, embezzlement, and murder that spans a decade. The room erupted. Voices raised in shock and anger. Men who had lost everything to Wickham's schemes surged forward, demanding justice. But Wickham himself sat, frozen, trapped by his own meticulous record-keeping, destroyed by the very evidence he had preserved to protect himself. "This is preposterous," he stammered. "Those documents are forgeries." "Then you won't mind if federal agents examine them?" Evangeline's smile held no warmth. "I believe Marshal Williams is already on his way." The lie became truth as hoofbeats thundered outside. Federal agents poured through the saloon doors, badges gleaming in the afternoon light. Behind them came a man Evangeline had not seen in 5 years. Thomas Hartwell filled the doorway with his presence. Cattle baron and force of nature, her father had aged but not diminished. His eyes found hers across the crowded room. "Eva," he said simply. The reunion would wait. Justice demanded immediate attention. The agents moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency, gathering evidence and witnesses. Wickham's empire crumbled in minutes, but the man himself proved more dangerous when cornered. His hand moved toward the gun at his hip, desperation overriding caution. "If I hang, you all hang with me." The shot never came. Sam Calloway, 8 years old and fierce as a young wolf, had slipped through the crowd. His small foot hooked around Wickham's ankle, sending the man sprawling. Adult hands pinned the banker before he could recover. Justice arrived in the form of iron shackles and federal custody. 3 months later, the entire town gathered for a wedding. Evangeline walked down the aisle between rows of faces that had learned to smile again. Families reunited after years of separation. Children who would grow up free of Wickham's shadow. The dress was simple white cotton, nothing fancy or expensive, but the tears in the congregation spoke of riches that could not be measured in gold. Sam stood beside his father as best man, proudly holding the simple gold band. When the preacher asked who gave this woman in marriage, Thomas Hartwell stepped forward. Her family does. All of us. The congregation rose as one. Men removed their hats. Women dabbed at their eyes. Even the hardest cowboys found themselves moved by the transformation of their community. Jed's voice cracked as he spoke his vows. I promise to love you as long as I draw breath, to stand beside you in whatever comes, to honor the gift you've given us. When they kissed, the cheers shook the small church. Outside, the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and promise. The reception lasted until midnight. Stories shared and friendships renewed. A community celebrating its freedom from fear. Sam gave a speech that left no dry eyes in the crowd. Ava bought Papa and me at auction, but she gave us everything. A home, a family, hope for tomorrow. The words echoed across the valley, carrying on wind that had once brought only dust and desperation. Now it carried laughter and music and the sound of children playing without fear. As the last guests departed, Evangeline stood with her husband and son on the porch of their home. The ranch stretched around them, green and prosperous under starlight. In the distance, other families worked their own land, free to succeed or fail on their own terms. The auction block had been torn down, the gallows burned to ash. What happens now? Sam asked. Jed's arm tightened around Evangeline's waist. Now we live, all of us, together. The stars wheeled overhead, witnesses to promises kept and love chosen over fear. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tonight held only peace and the knowledge that some purchases were worth any price. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.